And we're back. Hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Wazari Ippon podcast. I'm Pathfinder, one of the members behind the Kyokushin Analyst channel, and I'm joined, as always, by Chris, Shigeki X Edge.
How's it going, everybody?
So, a lot has happened since our last episode, but we figured we'd start with the things we covered last time. So, I think, Chris, because it was behind a pay-per-view wall, you didn't get to see the Shin Kyokushin All Japan, correct?
I didn't. No, it was
Okay.
behind a paywall, and it was, you know, uh, 4 o'clock in the morning. So wasn't
Okay, I'm
wasn't
insane
something I
enough.
wanted to do.
I'm insane enough that I did, so I'll just briefly cover it for anybody who didn't get to watch it. Yeah, and it was expensive. It was they usually do it by Taiget, which is a live stream like a pay-per-view service, but I think they changed it to E Plus or something like that. Because I remember trying to make an account, being like, I could have sworn I did this last year. They wouldn't let me in because they switched streaming services for no apparent reason because the layout was identical. But it was like 6,000 something yen. So
Wow. So
so
that's closer to $70 than
yeah, it was
70
about
US. Then yeah.
yeah, it was about 80 Canadian. It was pretty brutal. Um, but I mean the event was good. We got to see the debut of Yuta Takahashi in the new organization representing Takahashi Dojo. So Kembu Iriki did win again. He got another title. Got his two-peat back to back.
My boy, I
Yep.
love that dude.
Yeah, he did really, really well. One thing though that I have to say is um, Yuta Takahashi definitely got some pretty sketchy judging. I did send those videos to Chrissy just so we could talk about this.
Yeah.
I guess I shouldn't be too surprised, but I was a little surprised just because he did leave and is representing his own dojo now. But you could tell any of the favorites in the tournament, if it was close, like they'd always get the flag to go on to the next one. But if you
And
were from an
yeah.
outside organization, air quotes, like Yuta Takahashi or like Yuto Fukuchi representing Byakuren, they pretty much always got that extra round that they had to go
Mhm.
through to tire them out.
I mean, that used to happen in like when the Seito Kaikon guys would enter the tournament, in the early 2000s. So
Mm-hmm.
like 2003, 2007 World Tournament for the IKO. They had some Seito Kaikon guys, and you know, despite uh, you know, I would say there would be some spotty judging there, for those guys. So I think that just happens when you have an outsider uh, fighting in an organization. So I think they give them a harder time, unfortunately.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I mean, there's a precedent for this. We all know that. But and I think I'm not sort of alleging conspiracy here that they sat down and said, "You make sure Yuta Takahashi doesn't get to the final to fight Iriki." I don't think that's what happens. I think more than likely, a lot of the times it can be an unconscious bias too, because remember, a lot of the judges from any of these organizations are, branch chiefs and things like that.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of it can just be unconscious. Like if it's close enough, you just think, well, that's close enough. Or if,
Yeah.
there's one or two punch difference, you think, well, I'm going to give it to Kembu because he's the name here. It's just, they're not, I don't think it's a sort of upfront process in their brain. I think judging is hard to begin with, but so Yuta Takahashi, he had to fight like a million extension rounds and eventually lost. I thought he won the round he lost, but it was close. Thought it should have at
Mhm.
least gone to an extension. Um, one thing that did surprise me is Ochai. I didn't even know
Yeah.
he was going to be in the tournament because I hadn't seen him in the last couple, and he sort of just strolled out of nowhere and beat the living piss out of his first opponent. That scared the shit out of me.
Yeah,
I
he's so scary because
He's
he's
huge.
he's he's a big dude. Like I would say that me and him are pretty maybe close in weight, and I don't know how tall he is, but like he, I can throw head kicks sometimes, but he can throw head kicks all the time and like surprise people, and he's just He's like a wild card.
Yeah, he can be chest to chest with you and kick you in the head, which makes no sense for a guy with a gut that big. But
Yeah.
I wasn't like I didn't see him in the official lineup. Like when we were looking through the names and we were trying to, uh,
Mhm.
do the preview show. So him coming out, I was like, wow. And he ended up getting this was almost like 5 months ago now, guys. So forgive me, but I'm pretty sure he ended up losing though to Yuto Fukuchi, who somehow managed to beat him on the outside. I remember it was a smaller fighter, like two rounds deep into the tournament. I thought, wow, that's really impressive. Um,
Ochi, he doesn't get that far in tournaments. Like he'll like demolish the first
he
two or
killed the
three
first guy.
people,
It was brutal.
and and then um, I think he just got like he's a big guy, right? So I think he gasses out, and then against especially maybe if he was fighting Fukichi, like um, you know,
Okay, my bad. Yeah, so I went and looked through my clips just to make sure it was
yeah,
Yuta Goto, who's somebody we
okay,
talked about in the show that beat him, who's in my opinion a rising star coming out of that group for WKO. I think
yeah,
Yuta Goto is slowly becoming a staple there, and he does
yes,
train with Yuto Fukushi, so that's I think where I got confused. Um, before
he
the
does, even though they're two
yeah,
different organizations.
do you remember right before the not this All Japan that just happened? I think the 2020 one. There was
Hmm.
that video of Yuta Goto spinning back, kicking his teammate in the face and knocking him out by mistake. You remember
Yeah,
that? He
yeah,
brutally. It's a.
yeah.
Anyway, you can see Yuto Fukuchi in the background sparring with someone else at the same dojo.
Oh, is that like was that during one of those Miyamoto dojo sessions? Maybe.
Right, we talked about that
Yeah,
last time too. That
yeah.
was that was before the Miyamoto dojo got banned. Um, so yeah, lots of lore being built from that tournament. But um, yeah, it was a great tournament overall. We were both correct that Yuna Mokadai did really good. I think she placed third. And there was tons of sidekick openers in the women's tournament, which I know made you really happy. Talked about that last time too.
Yeah.
But a good tournament.
Um,
And I hope next time, now that they've gotten that out of the way with sort of Takahashi being a first timer, now this will be his second tournament. He's part of this organization, so I hope he gets a more fair go around this year.
hopefully, is when they should be having some sort of J or maybe JFKO
Yeah,
tournament in the spring. Hopefully.
yeah, we would expect that usually in March. We'll see if anything changes on that. I'm not sure if we'll talk about it later, but I'm not sure if the position of the IKO delayed All Japan will make them want to move that somewhere else.
Mhm.
But usually they don't mind going head to head. Sometimes the All Japans used to be like days apart. So
Yeah,
um,
even the world tournament, the last world tournament, the Shin
yeah,
Kyokushin one was like a weekend or 2 weekends before the IKO
yeah,
one.
they don't mind going head to head like that, trying to steal audience from each other. So okay, and then the one after that, probably the biggest tournament that year, and in my opinion, the best tournament we got was the Baltic Cup,
Mhm.
and we both saw that one.
Yeah, so that tournament that was in maybe the weekend before Christmas in Kaliningrad, which is if we are talking about current events, um, we are recording this in March of 2022. So currently, Russia and Ukraine are in the midst of war, unfortunately. But Kaliningrad is a part of Russia that's on the Baltic Sea. That is actually an exclave, so it's separated by maybe Estonia from like, sort of mainland Russia. And that's the Kaliningrad is the home of the Baltic fleet of the Russian Navy.
Yeah, and it was sort of a collection of not just Russian fighters, but there was kind of like the best of Europe as well, right?
Mhm.
So you had Igor Zagainov, you had Ekimov from Russia, and then you had Alejandro Navarro, who's I mean, God, who doesn't know him at this point? The living legend. What is he, 45 and still going after 20 years? You know,
Still going. Yeah.
yeah, that it was
He
a
might
great
even
great
make
tournament.
the world tournament next year. Who knows?
I can't I can't believe he's still going. It's just unbelievable. I'm, we're not even up there in that age. We're not anywhere near 40 and we're already feeling it. I don't know how he does it.
Yeah,
But
sure.
yeah, so
We're already falling apart. So
absolutely, God. So on the topic of the world stage and the current climate, before we get into the Baltic Cup, might be important to talk about with this conflict going on and all of
Mhm.
the sanctions and boycotts and organizations, including sporting organizations, pulling out. It's going to be really interesting to see what happens. So, for the most part, the karate world has been relatively silent,
Yeah.
probably trying to figure out what to do because, I mean, to be frank, most of the stars these days are Russian, and
Mhm.
if Lechi Kurbanov is anything to go by, right? Like we here don't have any super like insider information, but there's been Russian fighters in the past that have come out after retirement said yes that they were getting money from the state to help train full time, things like this.
Mhm.
It's not out of the realm of possibility that that still happens. So with the Russian economy, just completely tanking and the ruble not being worth very much, one question is, will that continue? Will they be able to keep paying their athletes, for the ones that that's happening for, and
Sure.
travel, right? Like, are they going to be allowed to compete in the world tournament? If this
Mhm.
war drags into a long war, like Syria or something, does IKO have to say, well, for the world tournament, we're just not going to be able to have Russian fighters come? Maybe there'll be a travel, but like who knows, right? It's sort of
Yeah,
up in
and
the
I
air.
think yeah, and I don't know if that would be sort of an organizational decision because it might be a governmental decision. They might
Exactly.
not, you know, Japan is an example. They're just letting international students and business travelers back into their country. They're not even having tourists right now. So, if they've been that hesitant to have tourists or, make any decisions about international travel because of the pandemic, that can call into question of what the next year or so can be for international travel to Japan or to anywhere for Russian athletes. I was just I didn't read the article in full, but it seemed like there was a ONE FC event either this weekend or last weekend in Singapore, and there were a couple Russian Muay Thai guys that were supposed to fight, and Singapore banned either Russian athletes or Russians in general from entering Singapore while they were in the air on the airplane. So they got to Singapore and they couldn't enter the country. So that if that's an example of what's to come, that's very unfortunate. But um, it is interesting to sort of speculate.
Yeah, I mean, it's important to talk about because this is going to have massive knock-on effects for the karate world, even in our own little bubble. Because,
Mhm.
like we said, like Russia has a majority of the stars, at least in this generation. So especially for IKO, so it's going to be interesting to see what they do. And like you said, Japan has already joined the sanctions against Russia. So like you said, who's to say that they wouldn't, ban travel? We'll have to see
Yeah,
what happens with that. Um, yeah,
that
and so
that
sorry, go ahead.
that sort of brings into question, say if the world tournament happens next year, 2023, in November, and Russian fighters are not allowed to come, does that open up more opportunities for the Japanese fighters to win the world tournament more decisively? Not that Ueda's win was anything bad, but he did win on boards, like compared to maybe winning decisively in a fight with Eremenko. So does that open up more opportunities for Japanese fighters to maybe win a little bit more, or what other countries do you think um, could gain from not having Russian fighters. I'm not sure. Uh, Unfortunately, definitely not America. We don't seem to be producing. Well, we do send fighters to the world tournament, but maybe not elite level fighters like Russia or Japan. So, do you have any other countries in mind that could sort of take those spots?
Uh, yeah. So I would say Lithuania would be a big one for WKO with
Yeah, for sure.
yeah, so with Gorkas and stuff like that. I think he would greatly benefit from not having to fight Russian fighters. Not that ever seems to be a problem for him. The man's an absolute fucking monster.
Yeah.
Um,
But I mean, I think uh,
for
for Shin
IKO, I think it's
Kyokushin,
Spain. I think Navarro would benefit the most.
yeah, Navarro would benefit, but he might not even be able to travel because he lives in Russia.
Yeah, he's training at Eremenko Dojo, right? So he might also
Or
get caught up
yeah,
in that ban.
so that's even interesting to see if
That's true. I'd
with that.
forgotten about that.
Yeah,
Yeah, because I always see on Instagram he's always at Eremenko's dojo training there. So
he's married to I don't know her last name, but Ksenia. She's also a world champion in the women's division. So
mm,
she's uh, she's no joke either.
yeah, I think definitely for WK would be Lithuania, and then probably if Navarro, was able
Yeah.
to leave because he's a Spanish citizen or whatever or however that works, it would be him. I think because he'd be one of the. Because I mean, all the top foreigners for IQ come from Russia, right? So it'd be like Japan, and then like Navarro and a couple guys from like Poland and stuff like that. So
Yeah,
um,
and it could be Pat. Although he might not be fighting in the next tournament because he's probably in his early 30s now. But Patrick Sipin
no, it's
from
exactly what I was
Poland,
thinking of. Yeah,
um, and he got pretty far. I think he got maybe to the semifinals in the last World Tournament in 2019. So, if he decides to fight in the next one, he could get a lot further, maybe. You know.
yeah, no, absolutely. Everything's up in the air right now. It is worth noting that I was told by friend of the show, Kyokushin Spirit on Twitter that EKO, the European block of WKO, they have some independence. It's not quite like IKO where Japan sort of directs everything. They have
Mhm.
sort of semi autonomy, and they've already cut ties with Russia. They said they won't do tournaments with the Russian side of WKO. So that was a decision they made already. So far they're the only ones who have sort of stated a stance on what will happen, and
Mhm.
because he's Kyokushin Spirits with the uh, France dojo there, so
Okay.
he knows about that stuff going on. So he's a good resource for that kind of stuff. You guys should follow him on Twitter if you want to know more about that. He's always posting updates on what's going on from WKO Europe. He's deeply ingrained there.
I'll have to check him out. I've never heard of him, but um, France is another country that might, for at least for the IKO, could be a potential contender.
Yeah, to Sao.
Um, to Sao, because he's like my age or a year younger than me. I'm 30, so um, he might have one more world tournament in him. And then he trains a couple guys, couple up and comers, um, especially like, a guy named Gian, I think,
Mm-hmm.
who's a French guy who seems to be winning a lot in France right now. So he could make a name for himself if those spots were open. You know.
Absolutely. So, we'll keep you guys updated. We'll talk more about this on the next episode. We'll try to keep on top of news on sanctions or, boycotts or whatever happens with this. But
Yeah.
on the Baltic Cup itself, I think that was the best tournament we got last year. You had everybody from top level except for the Japanese guys for IKO. You had Alejandro Navarro, you had Igor Zagainov, you had Ekimov. Everybody was there. and we
Mhm.
got to see those guys fight a lot. So there was something, uh, Chris, you were telling me before the show started that you thought with the way Navarro's first fight went down, that sort of played a big part in the tournament. I didn't sort of catch that, so I want you to
Yeah.
explain that.
So I think either Navarro had like a very easy first fight, or he got sort of bypassed in the first round. But in the second round of fighting, he fought a guy named with the first name Malik from Lebanon. Um, and they were fighting, and Alejandro caught Malik a quick uh, sort of um,
It was a
wash.
Brazilian
Yeah,
kick, right? That he kind of caught him on the
yeah,
nose.
it was a Brazilian kick that caught him on the nose.
Yeah, I remember that.
Uh, but it was just lightning fast. It was crazy. Uh, you know, it's like the guy has no hips. Navarro, like he can just kick you anywhere from any direction. But yeah, so it was a Brazilian kick that caught the Lebanese guy like on the nose, and that caused the Lebanese guy to have a nosebleed that continued throughout the fight, and fight was stopped several times to sort of stuff the guy's nose with toilet paper, and that kept falling out, and it just seemed to like drag on. And I think just the length of the fight and sort of the frustration and sort of the adrenaline dump of just stopping and starting um, sort of contributed to Alejandro not doing well in his next fight, which was against Andre Luzin, who is definitely a guy you want to be top shape to fight, because he's scary as well. So yeah, I think that fight with Malik just dragging on and stopping and starting um, definitely affected Alejandro's tournament from then on. So yeah, that was just something I noticed.
No, that's good because when I watch these events, usually I am sort of clipping each fight
Mm.
and trying to either upload it on Twitter for people to see or just archiving the footage in case I need it for highlights later. So I'm sort of half watching, half editing. So when there's
Mhm.
usually a stop in the action, I usually look away to continue editing. So I definitely remember seeing him eat that Brazilian kick and then stop to, but I didn't know it kept happening like multiple times they stopped. I must have missed that. Um, I I understand that for whatever reason, Kyokushin Kaiken's always been sort of blood adverse. Like even in the 100-man kumites, they will often stop it to get them to switch gis when it starts getting a little bit bloody. They really like
Mhm.
that sort of white, pristine look, even in the new Honbu. It's just like white mats,
Yeah.
white walls. Like everything has to look, perfect. I don't quite understand why they're so squeamish about blood, but that's a good example of why they probably shouldn't be. It can affect fighter performance. I don't know why they don't just let the nose bleed. Like I don't think anyone's gonna pass out. You know.
Yeah. It just seemed like more of a hassle to clean up afterwards,
No,
maybe.
exactly. Yeah.
But and also, nobody tests for, like, I'm not saying that the guy has HIV or anything, but uh, they don't perform any blood tests. So we really
Hmm.
don't know what anyone. I'm not suggesting that anyone takes
No, I
performance
know.
enhancing drugs, but
I know what you
we
mean.
don't
Yeah.
test. So that could be a concern as well. We just don't know what people have in their blood.
That could be. I was told though by Nicholas Pettis. I don't know if it's still the case, but they would test the top eight for like all Japan and World Tournament for like the super important one. The guys who
Oh,
made it
really?
to the finals, like top eight, would get tested after the fact. I don't know if they still do that. They don't disclose much. These
Yeah.
organizations are very sort of, people who are in know, and then if you're not in, you don't need to know, basically.
Yeah.
But no, that's a good point on the blood thing. I did see the first round of that, but I missed it. But then yeah, he fights Andre Luzin in the next round, who is a world champ himself, of for weight. In 2017, I believe, he beat Yuta Takahashi to get first place. for
Mhm.
heavyweight, I believe, 90 kg, I think. Um,
Yeah,
and
he would be a heavyweight, I think.
yeah, and one of the best spinning heel kicks I've ever seen. That guy kills a lot of people with that. So for
Yeah.
Navarro at 45, and they went like a couple rounds. Like it was a great fight, and they were really beating the dog shit out of each other. For Navarro to be able to keep up with him at 45, just
And
insane.
it seems like Navarro wasn't happy with decision with losing.
Yeah, he
I
did
think
seem upset about it. Yeah.
yeah. So I think he thought he did better than other people thought, what the judges thought. So that says something as well, to be 45 and have that much confidence in yourself, you know?
No, absolutely. I'd have to go back and watch the fight like tit for tat to give my own judgment. I remember it being rather close, so I could see him wanting, maybe another extension. But I think we should also talk about the. I don't want to say breakout star because he's been around for a while. But if you had asked me before the tournament who would win, I would not have picked Ekimov. But Ekimov, man, what a career-defining tournament he had! Like crazy.
Yeah, I know. And his fight with Igor was pretty close. I mean, that final fight, they went for two extensions, and I would say that the first round was even, so I would say Hikewake for that. But I gave the second round to Igor, to Zagainov. So I don't know why they went a third round, but yeah. And then it turns out that Akimov became the champion at the end. So definitely good for him.
Yeah, Igor Zagainov is who I would have picked to win for sure. I think he's a rising star. He's young. He's been on my radar since he knocked out All Japan legend Shohei Kamada with his own move, with a high kick
Mhm.
knockout in the World Tournament 2019. I was blown away by that. I think he was only like 21 at the time or something. He was really young.
Yeah.
And I think he is the future. He'll when Eremenko decides to retire, I think he'll inherit that throne as like the kingpin in Russia, and I expected him to win. I wouldn't have thought Ekimov would beat him. I do remember thinking a second round was maybe a little bit towards Igor, but I've noticed a lot of the time, especially in IKO, if the finals, if it's close and it's like a great fight, a lot of the times they'll just let it go. They just want to see uh
Yeah, it
more
always
rounds.
goes, especially at the World Tournament. If I, I don't know if we talked about this earlier. We talked about it offline, but if the guy's a foreigner fighting a Japanese guy or a guy from outside the organization, they'll definitely give them an extension no matter what. So
Yeah, it's always going to go a couple rounds at least. Um
yeah.
and So yeah, so Ekimov ended up winning, which was a surprise to me at least. I would have given it to Igor, but I think it's the best tournament we had last year. So speaking of this year and Igor Zagainov, we just had a Russian Cup that went ahead as scheduled, and the
Mhm.
final ended up being for heavyweight Igor Zagainov versus Gorkshin, and
Wow,
Zagainov won with a high kick knockout, which
wow,
is very very impressive.
against Gorkishin. That he's. I mean, the Gainov is a tall guy, but so is Gorkishin.
Oh
So
yeah, they were
that's
looking each other in the eyes the whole fight.
that's pretty cool.
Yeah, I missed it live because I figured with all the stuff going on in the world, they would have delayed it or something. And they ended up I don't understand how this stuff works. I wish I knew somebody on the inside who could explain it to me.
Mhm.
But the live streaming service they use for the Baltic Cup and the YouTube channel they use to upload it, they used a
Mhm.
completely new one that was just made for this. But it was like the same camera setup, so it's got to be the same guy doing it. So I don't know why he made an entirely new like it's every time it's like Kumite live streaming or some random hodgepodge of word salad streaming.
Yeah.
And so the
It's never
problem,
like Super Karate or RU or anything like that. I think those guys are separate, right?
yeah, I think you're right. Um and it's really annoying because if you don't, they seem to only make it the day before. So there's no time to find it and bookmark it and be ready for it. Sort
Mm.
of have to go through it and look for where it's gonna be. It's not consistent like Kyokushin Online for the All Japan or anything like that.
But they actually did Kyokushin Online. They did put the quarterfinals and then the semifinals slash final on Kyokushin Online. But I think they put it on there in January, so you had a month gap. But it is up there, and that's how I watched it again today in preparation for our chat.
Gotcha. Okay. So I think so no surprise that Igor Zhuganov won this Russian Cup this year. And again, another high kick knockout. So maybe he's going to take Shohei Kamada's place as sort of the mini Crow Cop of this organization. I'm really happy about that.
I'm excited. I like him a lot. He
Oh, he's
and
great.
there seems to be no ego with him. I think he's all these guys, all these up and comers, like the people we're going to talk about in a couple minutes. None of them are over 25, so they're all young guys, and especially with Igor, he just seems like a nice guy who happens to be an absolute murderer. So I like that about him, that there's really no ego, at least from what I could tell.
Yeah, as the last generation we just left maybe 2 years ago was winding down, I was sort of feeling lethargic about it. Like, man, I don't really see anybody on the horizon that's gonna replace the excitement. Like, to me, the way I see it is like the Hajime Kazumi, Francisco Filho generation was the best we ever
Mhm.
got. And then there was a
Mhm.
lull in between that was, in my opinion anyway, pretty bad. And with like just big examples sticking out, like one off, but like the core wasn't amazing. But once those guys from that
Well,
generation,
I would argue that that is when the Russians started to take over. So they had um,
yeah,
Sergei Azapov. They had
Teriel,
yeah, well, Tariel later. They had uh, Kurbanov.
yeah,
So like that 2000, like between the last maybe Hajime Kazumi tournament, which I think was 2001. So 2003 and 2007 world tournaments were sort of the beginning of new generations, I think. And definitely for the 2007 world tournament, which I just watched on YouTube a couple weeks ago, that was definitely an end of an era there. And you could see the new faces of what would become like the mid 2000s, or not maybe the 2010s, uh, batch of fighters pretty much started in the world in the 2007 world tournament.
yeah, absolutely. And I think I found when I compare like the eras, like if I'm talking about greatest fighters, there was less, in my opinion, in that era than the previous one. But
Sure.
I felt um, maybe like 2000, 2012, 2013 till maybe 2017, 2018. At least in Japan, we got a pretty good era with the four aces of the All Japan. You had Yuta Takahashi, Shohei Kamada, Shoki Arata, and Mikio Ueda. I thought they had a really strong heavyweight, consistently exciting, consistently get knockouts, heavyweight Japanese division that was super deep. And these guys
Mhm.
basically traded wins and losses back and forth in the All Japan, and they all did really well in the world tournaments. And when they
Mhm.
sort of all retired or left the organization recently, I thought, man, who the hell's going to replace these guys? But it seems like the answer is going to come from Russia with Igor Zagainov and all these guys coming up. But there's some other guys that you had your eye on that you wanted to talk about too, right?
Yeah, so I when I was watching the Baltic Cup, I noticed a couple of guys that seemed to have potential. So of course Zagainov, of course Ekimov, but there's also a guy Ilya Polikov. He was the guy with the chest tattoo. If you watch it, he definitely showed potential, and he seems to be a rising star within Russia. Maybe, he is like right behind Igor, maybe, I would argue. And then there was another guy, Roman Parkhamenko. He's a relatively short, blonde kid who comes from Igor's dojo as well, Team Godhand, which is they're based in Yekaterinburg or something like that. But they're called Team Godhand, and they're pretty active on social media, and they post a lot of their training sessions. So he's from Igor's dojo, and there's another guy, Ilya Averkin, who got to maybe the semifinals, and um, he beat another guy from Team Godhand, a very young kid. Maybe he was 18 or 19 years old. So yeah, lots of potential from those guys. I mean, hopefully, uh, of course, what's going on in Ukraine clears up relatively soon, but also hopefully, by the time the next world tournament rolls around, there is hopefully some room for travel and would get those guys some exposure.
Absolutely. I saw Verkin too and was definitely impressed with him. Uh, so that one I definitely agree with. I think there was a lot of positive takeaways from the Baltic Cup. I guess one good segue here is we got confirmation that the delayed IKO Kyokushin Kaikan All Japan is going to go ahead this year early in April, and then they're still going to do this year's at the normal time in November. So we are going to get uh two this year from the Kyokushin Kaiken. But why that ties into the Baltic Cup is one of Japan's top guys, Ryonosuke Hoshi.
Hmm?
We talked about this I think on the last podcast actually. So for the 2020 Kyokushin Kaiken All Japan, they put him on World Karate. They had him on the magazine cover. They were really pushing him to be the next big thing for IKO. I think knowing that people like me and probably a lot of people in Japan were feeling weary about all four of the All Japan aces retiring or leaving or doing something else,
Hmm?
they needed a new heavyweight star. So they really pushed him super, super hard. And then, as we talked about on the last show, he ended up losing to a lightweight in the All Japan and didn't place in the top 8 at all, which was a huge shock. And I can't imagine that went down well with the organization. And it's been radio silence for Hoshi, who had his breakout performance in the Baltic Cup in 2018.
He fought my senpai, my dojo mate, Daniel, um, in the world tournament, and he beat my senpai. So he that's just a little tie into Hoshi as well.
Yeah, he sort of been all over the place. Most of the Japanese fighters, they didn't travel too much. Like you didn't see Yuta Takahashi fighting in the Baltic Cup or a Russian Open. He sort of stayed to
Mhm.
Japan, but Hoshi was willing to travel to fight, which is a little bit interesting for Japanese fighters. But we sort of got an update, and as suddenly, very suddenly, it was announced last week that he's fighting Rui in K1. So he has left the Kyokushin Kaiken and formally left it and is fighting out of Power of Dream with Chihiro Nakajima, who's another Kyokushin Japan fighter that left to go fight in K1. So I messaged Nakajima because I know him a little bit and said, like, I wasn't expecting this at all. I expected that Hoshi was going to continue on, try to be the heavyweight star for Kyokushin Kaiken. Like, is he doing like Bay Noah? Like, is he going to do both? And he told me no, he left the organization. So he's fully in kickboxing now, which is blew me. I was not expecting that at all.
I don't know if we talked about it on the last podcast, but Nakajima is also someone that left Kyokushin or left the Kyokushin Kaikon under mysterious circumstances. So I'm sure he welcomed Hoshi with open arms.
No, absolutely. Power of Dream. So, for those who are crossovers from a podcast about kickboxing that I do with Dogman, talking about K1 stuff, you can find that on SoundCloud as well. Um, we talk about how Power of Dream seems to be like the broken toy box that they repair. So one of their big stars, to K, was a street kid who got taken in by the and tried like sort of turned his life around. And Chihiro Nakajima, left IKO under very mysterious circumstances. Nobody seems to know what happened, but there's rumors, but nothing that anybody really knows for sure. And he sort of ended up there, and now Hoshi, who was pushed as this next big star, and then there was no formal announcement that I could find that he left, and he just suddenly turns up there. It seems like it's like a home for wayward sons, for
Mhm.
for the lost to find their way back. So Power of Dreams a really really cool gym, and you know K1's cruiserweight division is absolutely horrifically bad. It's comically bad. So uh, if I don't know what happened behind closed doors, maybe losing in the All Japan caused some rifts, especially losing to a lightweight probably didn't go down too well. If you need sort of an easy bounce back, fighting Rui in K1's about as a fucking layup. That's all I can say.
And yeah, he's. I mean, Hoshi. I mean, he didn't really impress me that much. Like, I mean, he did beat my senpai, but uh, you know, I didn't think he would be an elite fighter. So maybe it was also like he also didn't see um, a way of living or how to make a living within the karate world. So maybe K1's the better option for him, and
Yeah, who
hope he
knows what
keeps
exactly happened.
hope he keeps his hands up because K1's a lot different than Kyokushin.
Yeah, and he was sort of a plot forward fighter, like plot forward and punch heavy. Like you never saw him throwing any spinning kicks or anything sort of fancy. So maybe where he can get gloves on, smash some teeth. That'll
Yeah.
suit him better. Especially. Sorry to be mean about this. If you know a podcast about kickboxing, I'm a lot meaner on that one. But Rui is awful, and Rui has lost like 4 or 5 fights in a row now, I think. And he trains out of like an Instagram influencer gym, so like they definitely gave him a fair start in the organization, let's say. But I'll keep you guys updated on how he does.
Have you guys talked about Smoker Jim?
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Their like logo is just a weed leaf.
Yep, there's some great ones. There's definitely some interesting stuff on the K1 side.
Yeah.
So I guess the last one to talk about is the fact that we have 2 Kyokushin Kaiken All Japans. Now, I think probably you'll agree with me because we don't really have any information on this, but I would assume they're going to be the exact same lineup, right? Like, I don't see anything changing within a few months.
Without a doubt, yeah. Um, yeah, I would say that they're going to be exactly the same. But the change from maybe the last All Japan, which was in 2020, is that they are now moving back to the Tokyo uh, Metropolitan Gymnasium, uh, which they weren't able to use during the World Tournament and the last All Japan because they were renovating it for the Tokyo Olympics. That uh, was also a joke, I think. But yeah, so back to the original venue of the World Tournament and the All Japans. So that's exciting. But also the All Japan Women's Championship is gonna be happening on the same weekend as the male tournament in April. Um, so, like I said in the last podcast, I'm not too familiar with the IKO women, but um, I would look out for a fighter named uh, Endo Hitomi, maybe, because she may be a contender in that tournament.
Yeah, I would say probably Nanami would be
Sure.
a
Yeah.
favorite for sure for the women's side. She usually does really really well, and the organization.
Sato Nanami. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. She seems to get a pretty big push from the organization too. She's on a lot of magazines for the IKO, so I think they put a lot of resources into her, and she's a good fighter, and she's had good results. So would not be surprised to see her do really well. Now, on the men's side, the very interesting thing is the sort of cut down version of the 2020 when we first got into this pandemic. Um, the lineup's almost identical to the 2020 All Japan, with the obvious, missing Hoshi, who's now gone to K1. So actually, somehow the Japanese team, I think, has gotten even a little bit worse just because they've lost someone that they didn't replace. Um,
Yeah.
sorry.
Who would they have? It would be Nishimura,
Yeah, Nishimura would be their top heavyweight.
Yamagawa.
That I think
No,
for heavyweights, that's it.
just those two.
I think so. Um,
Yeah.
I haven't seen anybody new. Um, I mean, it's just
Kovalenko.
yeah. So that we'll get into that. So they're going to be represented by a lot of middleweights again. So Kobayashi, Takahiro Kaga, Yuki Shimizu, who placed third, and I think Yuki Shimizu is the one who beat Hoshi in 2020, if I remember correctly. There is a lot of
Probably he's like a scrappy little guy, I think.
yeah,
So I wouldn't be surprised.
yeah. It's hard to remember that far back, but though those guys I think are rounding out the show. I'm just looking at the card that they put up
Mhm.
of the names, and it's all the same guys from 2020. So it's all the middleweights again. But as we remember from the 2021, you mentioned Kovalenko. So Kovalenko teaches at Honbu and lives in Japan. Kovalenko is Russian, and so he will likely be exempt from anything that happens with Russia going forward because he already lives in Japan, so he can still go. And he's
Mhm.
well liked by the organization. I mean, he's teaching at Honbu, so they clearly like him and trust him.
Yeah.
And man, he absolutely smashed them in 2020. Just
Yeah.
it
He
was
ran through
yeah,
people.
just ran through them because there's so many middleweights, and with the sweep rules, he's so big. He would just grab their leg and slam them into the mat. And I remember
He had been in like the country for like 3 weeks. Like it was like they just threw him into that tournament and
just came there to ruin their dreams.
yeah.
And I remember after the tournament was over, Yuzo Suzuki, who is a world champion and one of the, I think he's a branch chief now. Like he was helping with the Japanese team. He tweeted out on Twitter. He was like, "Man, he's like, we're gonna have to go back to the drawing board and figure out how to beat Kovalenko because we got stomped this year." Like he was very frank about it. Was like, "Man, Japanese fighters did not do good against Kovalenko. Like, I have to re-examine our strategy going forward." I'm gonna be interested to see how they do that, but without many heavyweights, I don't like their chances. I think Kovalenko, and especially if the one in November is the same lineup, I think Kovalenko might three-peat.
Yeah, I don't know how long he's going to be at Hombu though, because it's usually 3 years. So would he even be in Japan by November? I don't even know. That might be interesting.
Oh, I see what you're saying. You think he might have to go back before the third one?
Yeah, because the usually those international teachers stay for 3 years. So, but I mean, given the state of the world right now, might give him
Yeah, he might ask for
extend
asylum
his
in Japan.
position.
Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. But yeah, so it would be interesting if he ended up going home. But
So I think we both agree that Kovalenko will likely run through this tournament again. But I would like to say I have one wild card
hmm,
that I wouldn't bet out on, and somebody I've been following for a while. I gave him Prospect of the Year on my awards roundup. Yamagami Daiki. He's a middleweight, quite tall, and he's young. I think he's only 20 years old, and he actually beat oh my god, it's lost. Ashot Zarinian. He
ow,
he
okay.
he beat him in the All Japan um when he was like 17 or something. That was sort of what put him on my radar. And then he won the All Canto, I believe,
Hmm.
in 2021 in very impressive fashion. And he has a lightning lightning fast front kick to the face where he leans back hard and almost like a piston going both directions, just shoots that out, and he catches so many people with it, and they have to count their teeth after, like their head snaps back and just about touches their spine. And under the new Kyokushin rules, I don't think he could knock Kovalenko down with it because Kovalenko's so big and so tough, so much bigger than him. But if he catches Kovalenko in the face with that fucking piston, that's Wazari, right? Under the new rules. So
If he does Zanshin,
yes,
that's the new So
yeah,
he better be trained in Zanshin because he won't give it to him if he
yeah.
doesn't.
So I think of the lighter guys, he has the best chance to sort of upset and just land two front kicks and call it a day. Because I don't see him knocking him out or anything like that, but he's definitely a wild card where I think he's gonna be part of the next generation of top Japanese guys for sure. He's really impressed me.
I would be interested in seeing if Kovalenko's skills. I don't want to be mean, but like, I don't know if Japan has helped him fight wise because he was training with monsters in Russia, and he just seems to be teaching in Japan. Although I'm sure he trains and does fight training and stuff, but no one's big. He would only be training with Nishimura, and he already beat Nishimura, so I don't see how he would improve, like skills wise, while he's in Japan.
Well, based on the content I've seen on Kyokushin Online, it seems like he trains a lot with Kyohei Ajima, who's a retired fighter,
Okay.
who's a big guy and really good, and Arthur Hovhannissian.
Hmm?
I see him train with a lot and do tutorial videos together for the Honbu of showing how he does his sweeps that he's so good
Hmm?
at and stuff like that. So I would assume he's mostly training with them. Um, that would be my
Ajima. So
guess.
Ajima. So my former, like the former head instructor of the New York dojo, uh, Keiji Sensei, moved back to Ibaraki Prefecture, where Ajima is from, and now now teaches at a branch under like the same branch chief as Ajima. So he's quite familiar with Ajima Kyohei. So that's kind of cool.
Yeah, and he was a great fighter in his own right, in his own day. And he had a bunch of showdowns with Navarro, some really classic fights with Navarro.
And him and Schultz had that stare down as well
Yes.
in the 2015 World Tournament, maybe.
Oh yeah, he's a wild
Schultz,
boy. He's
Schultz hit him with a back kick, and then Ajima stood right back up, and they went face to face like they were gonna just brawl, but they separated them.
yeah. Achima's cool. He's a wild boy. He doesn't always follow the rules. Kind of interesting to see from a Japanese fighter, but yeah. So I think obviously Kovalenko is going to be the favorite at both of these. I would say Nanami Sato is probably going to win both for girls. Um, and yeah, I think we'll do another episode when we finally get a lineup for
Hmm?
JFKO. But until then, I think that's it for announced new tournaments. Is there anything else you wanted to add?
No, that's it. Yeah, so the IKO All Japan, the 2021 uh, makeup one is April 16th and the 17th. Um, I just read that on the website today. So about a month away.
And I don't think they've announced like specifics yet, but I imagine. I mean, they made the platform for it, so I'm assuming it will be on Kyokushin Online, which is like I think it's like $5 US the sub.
Yeah, to sub, but it might be a pay per view, so you might have to pay.
Yeah, we'll
Some
keep you
more.
updated
Yeah,
on that.
yeah.
But Kyokushin Online has a big backlog of tournaments and videos and stuff. And it's where they're sort of pushing the future for IKO. So
Mhm.
that's going to be where it is. So if you guys want to watch it live, I would definitely look into Kyokushin Online subscriptions.
And if you are an IKO student, they are changing the kata, uh, make it more in line with traditional Goju kata, the advanced kata at least. So they are posting the new versions of the kata on Kyokushin online. So if you are interested in kata in general or are a current IKO 1 student, go check that out because they're going to start, or they already have for the past year or so, implemented the new versions of the kata.
Yeah, it's a pretty good resource overall. I've been actually pretty impressed with the service. I didn't have much expectations going in, but it's actually been pretty good. And they've been putting a lot of like vintage stuff that you
Hmm?
can't find up there, that like old VHS rips of all Japans that I spent my life looking for and could never find. So
You didn't want to pay $100 for a VHS tape?
well, I mean, I'm psycho enough that I would, because I have an insane collection. I have hundreds of Media 8 DVDs and VHSs, but some of them are just impossible to find.
I don't know why a DVD costs $100. That is insane to me, but they do
Because
in the
morons like me
Kyokushin
will pay
world.
for it. All right, guys. Well, that's it for this episode of Wazari Ippon podcast. Thank you guys all for tuning in, and we'll keep you guys updated on everything going on, and we'll probably have another one around the time JFKO gets announced. Us.
Thank you.